right. So the first question is just the first time that you recall using your imagination as a kid. And it doesn't have to be the absolute first memory,
Okay,
but
yeah,
something that's like memorable of like, I use my imagination to create something and this like stands out as like one of the first things I was proud of or one of the first things that I recall showing off.
I used to get a lot of those American Girl craft books, and one of them was this salt dough book. It was like a recipe book, and then they had all these little ideas. And I think one of them was just like a page of fake food. And I remember thinking, like, amazing, because I didn't have a lot of great food options for my Barbies. And I think I literally just had like a bundle of bananas. And there's really so much pretending you can do with that. So I remember making myself a lot of play food and always ornaments. So I think that's the first time I actually was making my own decisions creatively, opposed to just like when your preschool teacher like sits you down in front of like a decoupage page or something like that.
Did food, was that particularly like, I feel like some people would be really interested in the clothing aspect or vehicles or the house. Like, is food like specific to how you enjoy life, how your family enjoyed life? Like, that is it felt important to offer that also to your Barbies or to your toys?
Definitely. And I just like accessories in general, and I think that that was the most fun way to just make my Barbie world like a little bit bigger. Yeah, I mean, I really like food. I do enjoy cooking a lot. So, as an adult. So, that was probably just kind of the beginning of that. I think it's maybe as a kid was easier for me to go off of making miniature versions of things that exist in real life, because with that, a
Mhm.
lot of the decisions are already made.
I think it's interesting to how important that is to have many versions of something that you would experience in real life, like to have all those like little details for those things that like you're in charge of, your toys or your Barbies or whatever it is, like to have their world be similar to the things that you enjoy as a kid, as a human being in your big world.
Yeah,
Do you
well,
feel
when
like
you're
that was
playing dolls, it's kind of like the doll is an extension of yourself. So you would want to kind of have all the magical good things that you enjoy in your real life.
were there other you said ornaments as well? Was that like something you had in the miniature world as well?
No, those were big. Those were for real life me. I don't think my mom ever enjoyed the messes that came with me being creative. So
Hmm.
every idea I have of myself young making stuff is definitely like surrounding the holidays, because I could just get away with a little bit more stuff like that.
So did it feel like there was like a time and place to create? It wasn't necessarily whenever you want, like there needed to be certain parameters either
I think
set.
with Yeah, I think with that stuff, definitely it was more allowed during the holidays, because it was kind of like in the same world as baking, and so we were all in the kitchen more. And then during the summer, I was mostly outside. I remember I went through a huge phase where I was really into the idea of waterproofing something, because my I had kind of a wild fourth grade teacher, and he gave us this assignment where we would build these like cardboard boat structures
Mm,
and waterproof them, and then we would race them across the pool.
yeah,
And my team won, and I was very satisfied with that. Although
as you should.
I think that there's some debate over, still to this day, over whether or not my paddle was against the rules or not. He had said another team couldn't use a foam paddle, but we got to. I don't know. it's a lot of drama still, but
It's still being debated.
I probably, if I brought it up, I think that I I might get like an angry response from some of my middle school friends. But yeah, so after that, it kind of like clicked in my brain, and I was like, I'm gonna make myself a house and I'm gonna waterproof it. And then the next time it rains, I'm gonna just run outside and sit in it. And it's just going to rain and I'll just be in there, but I will be protected because, and it did end up raining after I had finished my little cubby, and it lasted probably 8 minutes. And then I was just in a wet box. And then, but in the meantime, I probably spent about like $120 in packing tape. I should ask my mom about that.
I think that that's so interesting with being a kid and like coming to a discovery of making something that you see on a big scale. You see an industrial boat or a house. There's not water just pouring into houses. And but if you shrink it down, then you get a little taste of how that might work on a very child size way to make something small float or to make a box waterproof. I think that curiosity to unlock that experience of being like, oh, if it's this size, I can do it. I think it's such an interesting experience.
And I think it's funny and I think it's something I do today still, kind of, where I'll be like, okay, I want to accomplish this thing. And there's most definitely the right way to do it. But I, at the time, and probably sometimes now, will just decide what my right way, how to like accomplish, whatever, taping a box rather than, just kind of building a wood structure.
Yeah, absolutely. Is that so? I don't think that that's necessarily natural to all kids. Mainly me being the other side of that coin of being like looking to an authority to be like, hey, what's the right way to do it? Let me replicate what you're telling me is the right way. So I think that curiosity is really interesting. Was that something that was either encouraged or discouraged from you, the way that you were going about it by the authorities in your life?
I honestly don't know if anyone like noticed what I was up to in that way. I think that it was kind of more like Katie's in the garage doing her whatever she's doing. So I don't know. I mean, if I had asked either of my parents, like, how do I make a waterproof box? They'd be like, I don't know. And why are you doing that? So I think it was just better for me to just kind of move in secret with my little schemes.
So where did you grow up specifically?
I grew up in LA mostly. And then as a teenager, I lived in Sherman Oaks area, the Valley.
Okay. I'm not super familiar with the geography there.
Oh, you must take a trip to Sherman Oaks.
I kind of just assume that sometimes the United States is like, oh yeah, I know the United States. And I go somewhere and it's like either really spread out or really close together, or the geography really dictates like how you live or like the kind of life you live. Did you ever have that experience or was that interestingly different from LA to Sherman Oaks, where it was like, oh, like life needs to adjust this way, or I get to explore my world more or less?
Yeah, well, when I was living in LA, I was living kind of in a hilly area, so I was definitely felt like very trapped. There was a neighborhood to walk around, but there were no other kids who lived in that area. So I was definitely just like, here I am in my house. Like, I was like very afraid of my house as well. I was convinced that the devil was living in my closet, like well into my like pre-teen age. And that it was just like, if something like new appeared in my room, I was like, a ghost put it here and I have to say things to the ghost, or like something's gonna happen. So I don't know. I was definitely keeping myself like mentally occupied in that way. And I have a brother, so it's not like I was totally alone. And there was a couple years where my childhood friend India lived like kind of walking distance. So I wouldn't say it was like totally, I was like one of the kids in the movie The Others, just
Sure,
like
sure.
hiding from the sunlight. But
Looking for food.
yeah, I do think like now I definitely much prefer like working by myself and like sitting in silence and just kind of like doing what I need to do and not like socializing in the meantime. I never did that well like in like group working environments.
Did you grow up religious?
No.
You didn't. But the
No,
devil was something
no, I completely invented the devil. It
interesting.
was it was not like my mom's an atheist, like it's like never like I don't know where it came from, but it was just like, and it was like the hell devil. Like I just found out about it.
Yeah.
But
It
it
was the
wasn't
hell's
like
devil.
it
It was
was
that
the
devil.
devil. It was the devil from hell where he lives.
Yeah, I mean, kids obviously I don't have kids, so I haven't experienced like seeing that kind of come out of nothing, but like just like fear manifesting in beings or in something that is more tangible than just that feeling. I don't know. I think it's wild just to hear what those adversaries are for kids growing up, what they had to kind of overcome that was
Yeah.
in their
Yeah.
closet or in their room.
In my closet, I had this like very 90s kind of like wooden ballerina bow sculpture, and it terrified me. Like I wouldn't look at it, like just something about it like just freaked me out so much. Like seriously, I don't know, but it was so funny because I do have a kid brother, half brother and sister who my sister Jane is 7, and they came out a little while ago and had a slumber party, and I've got art all over my walls, and they were like sitting in the TV room, and they're like, can you take that one off the wall before we go to bed, please? It's so scary. I was like, oh my God, it's gone. And now like I'll probably take it off the wall like before they come to my house, like until they're like 25. And then they'll
Right,
be
right.
like, oh no, there's that pumpkin that
That's
ruined my childhood.
that's wild. Yeah, because you're
Yeah.
obviously not thinking of trying to create something that would scare a child when you're creating it or buying it. You're like, oh, this pleases
Yeah.
me in a certain way.
Yeah. I was like, this is fun. Like, and it's just so funny. Like, I mean, really anything can be terrifying. You would not think it was at all.
Yeah. Yeah. So when did you start to kind of have a consistent thing that you were just making for yourself, by yourself? Like, and what forms did those take in kind of the earlier days?
When we moved to the valley, my mom sews, and so she kind of had more space to set up a sewing room. And so then it became like, okay, now there's like a designated like space to make stuff. So, and that's also about the time that like Etsy came out. And so I was on Etsy. I was like, I'm going to buy all my Christmas presents on Etsy. And I bought this purse and I got it, and it was hot glued together. And so it was like, if I put my phone in it, like it would just like completely disintegrate. And so then I was just kind of like, what the heck? And so it actually like pushed me into this like huge sewing phase. And I wasn't like doing anything like from a pattern. I was mostly just making like felt, like little food again sculptures. I was like making little felt cupcakes, and in my mind it was like with the intention to like list it on Etsy, which I never did.
So Etsy comes out. What was your feeling about like what that world was? Like what who was on the other end creating these things? Like obviously there's a big disparity between what you saw on the screen and then what like came in the mail. Like, but like when it first came out, like what were your feelings towards like a creative creator like world that's like available now?
I was really excited because I remember like I never liked any of my clothes. I don't know. I just didn't feel like I was like like I always felt like there was like some like physical item missing from my life that would like help me be like, okay, this is who I am as a person, like blah blah blah. So then when Etsy came out, I was like, fantastic. Like here's all these unique items that are like made by people. I'm not like at Target like buying a t-shirt that says shopping is my therapy like in
Mhm.
glitter, which is a
Mhm.
shirt I owned and wish I
Happily or
still
not
owned.
happily?
Oh no, I wore it like I'm that bitch.
Okay.
I was like, you know what?
You all
Whatever.
know. Read the
Yeah,
shirt.
you know, I know, and like I had a shirt with a chihuahua on it said like my chihuahua can kick your chihuahua's ass, and I would wear it like to the mall, and I'd be like, yeah, watch out for me because the shirt says it all.
Yep. Oh man.
So yeah, so I think I was really excited like to have this other avenue of figuring out how to express myself. I don't think I saw it as like fully like a way of expanding like my creative life, but I think but in like kind of a like superficial way. I was like, I'm gonna have this thing that no one else is gonna have, and everyone's gonna
Mhm.
be Joe, and it'll be so cool, like blah blah.
Was that something like standing out? I don't know. I guess I'm just curious as to some people are very happy to like align with like, hey, this is like this year's fashion that somebody else like laid
Mm-hmm.
out and like, oh, I like that color. I'm happy to ascribe myself to that. But like, was that of interest at that age? Like, were you interested in ascribing to what was quote unquote cool, or did you want to kind of like determine what was cool or what was?
I think I wanted both because I would get I realize now this is so silly. I had no basics. Like I didn't have any white shirts or anything. So it was just like every single item of clothing I had like was very loud. And so then it just felt like I never knew what to wear because everything was insane. But but then on the other hand, like somebody for a birthday or something, I got a blouse from Abercrombie and Fitch, and I was like, wow. And so like when I was wearing that shirt, like I knew I was like fitting in, and then I was like comforted, and then like that whole anxious part was fine, and then I could just focus on like hanging out.
Mm-hmm.
And then one time I was at the mall and I was wearing my blouse. And then this other girl was wearing the same blouse.
Mm.
And so I ran up to her. I was like, oh, we have the same blouse. But she was also like 13. And so she was like, so. And I don't think I ever wore it again. I was like, this blouse is actually for evil young women. I will not be wearing this blouse.
So you are in high school. Are you still like creating things? Are you still doing art on your own? Are you yet doing art? When does that become something that is like, oh, I want to spend my free time consciously or even unconsciously, you just find yourself doing it, like making things that make you feel good?
I think I would have waves of like energy where I would maybe spend like an entire Saturday sewing or something. And I just kind of always knew that I wanted to do artwork and I knew it would like fit into my life in some way. But at the same time, it was like all of the art education that I was getting at the time, like at school, was like, bring in a drawing of your great grandpa and we're gonna draw it in charcoal and then I'm gonna tell you that you got the nose wrong.
Hmm.
And you're like, okay. So it was just, I wasn't feeling very inspired, but I knew that there was like something I was like missing, because it's like, obviously, if that's all it was, like every museum would be like full of photos of like your great grandpa, like in charcoal.
Mm-hmm.
So then also, I was like a really bad student. Like I didn't do my homework and I did bad on tests. So I was it's not like I was like, I'm going to go to like, so and so college and then like I have something else lined up.
Mm-hmm.
Like it was just kind of the only thing that like I felt like good about, enjoyed, and like, kind of knew that I could be like capable,
Hmm.
because it didn't rely on all these other things that I was like, I can't do that. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, I can't even use a comma in a sentence, and I'm like 30. So it's a little extreme. But yeah, so then instead of going like right to college, I went to a school. It's called Oxbow. It's in Napa Valley. And I went kind of to like build a portfolio and just kind of like have a moment to like separate myself from high school and focus just on art stuff. So, and it was so great. Like I just really loved the experience, and everything came together like so clearly in my mind so fast. So that was probably like the smartest decision I ever made for myself, like up at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And so by the end of my time at that school, it was just a semester program. It was like I had it all figured out. Like I had like my, like a version of like the art style I had. I was like drawing nonstop. It was like more important than like really doing a lot of other things. Like whereas before, it'd be like a weekend and I wouldn't be like, oh, I'll entertain myself. I'd be like, what are my friends doing? Like, what are we, like it just became like the thing I enjoyed the most doing,
Mm-hmm.
and still kind of the same feeling today.
Mm-hmm.
And so after that, I just really loved the education that I had gotten there. It was interdisciplinary, so I was learning other stuff too, but in a different way that wasn't like memorize this like first paragraph from the Canterbury Tales. My teachers at Oxbow were like, well, if this is what you really love, you should go to SAIC in Chicago. So then I only applied there. And thank God I got in, because my parents would have been so annoyed if I was just sitting around for another semester. And then I went there.
Yeah. So going back to just before you go to Oxbow, or maybe even before that, was there a formative interaction with somebody else where your creativity was like affirmed or appreciated? It really solidified that like this has reach beyond just like something that you're making for yourself.
I don't think before, I think definitely after, when I started like going out of my way to seek out people that were interested all along. Like afterwards, I definitely spent that next summer hanging out with some of my friends that were kind of drawing all along. And I was like, here I am, I'm ready now.
Mm.
But before, like in high school, like when I was actually there, no, not really. Because I wouldn't like, not for any reason besides that. It just like, I didn't really think it was like that big a part of my life.
Mm.
So I wasn't really showing things that I was doing or.
Mm-hmm. So you just had like strong like individual resolve then. Is that what you're saying? Of just like, I know this is the thing for me. Like apart from like outside influence or like anybody telling you like, hey, you're really good at this. Like it was just like very grounded in yourself that this was
Yeah,
like your thing.
I think it was just kind of a gut feeling that I knew that like maybe it's not like something that's kind of like in the front of me right now, but it's definitely in there.
Mm-hmm.
And just even as a kid, like I just had like a very strong visual, like I didn't know what the art piece looked like, but like I had this like fantasy of myself as an adult, like making this like huge piece of artwork, and like I was so hot, and I was like 6 feet tall.
You were.
Yeah, which did not come true, unfortunately. I'm 5'2".
Hey, your
I
life's not
didn't
over yet.
That's true.
You get there.
I haven't met up to all my I haven't reached all my dreams, but I'll get
Mhm.
that surgery one day.
All right. So I didn't know that you came to Chicago. I don't know you
Oh
at all,
yeah.
so it doesn't really matter
Yeah.
what I think. Like, wow. But other than the fact that I live there, so why do you think that whomever told you that you need to go to SAIC, like what was it about that school in particular, or what they do, or what they foster there, that resonated, you think, with that person, that like your artwork would fit in there, or you would benefit from their education?
I think it was more the program that they were talking about. You never had, like, I know at some other art colleges, you kind of have to go in and be like, I'm a painter. And then if you decide like months in, like, actually, I'm a sculptor, then it's like a whole thing. The thing I really liked about SAIC was it was just like every semester I had there was like very different, because I could just kind of take whatever kind of like studio classes and then, you know, proper classes I wanted until, you know, the numbers match. So it was like I started the first year I was doing painting, and then I was like, I hate this. And so I just took a ceramics class, and kept doing that like consistently throughout the entire time I was there. But then like some semesters I took a couple puppetry classes, I took bookbinding classes, because you know, mostly now I stick with ceramics, but I do really enjoy kind of using other materials. I took a drawing class once, and I think my final piece for that class was actually I had drawn all over a desktop computer, and I was like lugging it to the school building, which from the train you have to walk like a half a mile. I was like, you know, I should be walking in with a piece of freaking paper right now, but for some reason, like, I even managed to turn this into a sculpture. So, but you know, I just like that I could kind of like, they give you a lot of room to change your mind and
Mhm.
like learn like as many different things as you want to learn. You're not kind of pigeonholed into what you
Mhm.
decide when you're like 18 and like going in there.
Right. Is there anything that you took from from there that wasn't even in your mind going in? Like, was it something like that you saw or experienced for the first time there that you've kept on, that like you weren't even thinking about going in?
Well, I wasn't even thinking about taking a ceramics class. I really
Mm.
thought I would be. When I went in, I was like, oh, I want to be a children's book illustrator.
Mm.
So in my mind, going in there, you know, I thought that that's what I would be doing. So I think just the fact that I admitted to myself that I just enjoy sculpture like way more was like probably the biggest flip, that I
Mhm.
don't even know if I hadn't have gone there, because it's not like I'm just going to build a ceramic studio for no reason. Or
Mhm.
I think that I don't know that that would have happened if I hadn't have gone to school.
Yeah. What about the like the physical experience of ceramics felt new or different or eye-opening apart from drawing? Like, what is it about the
I
hands-on experience of that?
I think that it was just like when I finished the piece, my experience was like, wow, like this is something that like it has weight to it, like it exists, like you can't pretend that this like doesn't exist.
Like in space, you had to kind of reckon with it, like, or
Yeah,
anybody would have.
yeah, like it's just as real as like anything else in the room.
Hmm.
Whereas the painting, I think it for me it was like, okay, when I'm like staring into it, I'm like, there it is, but like it just felt more like you can like walk away and forget about it.
Hmm. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, because I mean, if you're building boats, you're building waterproof houses, you're making ornaments, like all these things are just like you bump into it as just like a human being in the
Hmm.
world. Like it is a different experience than just like something that was in your mind and is on a flat surface and then could blow away or could be
Yeah,
put in
or
the
get
closet.
shoved into a drawer and get like fussed up and
Mm.
you know.
Was there anything about ceramics or any of your like art experiences in art school that pushed your comfort zone to where you're like, I always find it interesting in myself. I feel like I know when I'm approaching something where I'm not afraid, but I'm just like, I have more nerves about it, but I'm more curious than that nervousness. But the nervousness needs to be there for me to know that I'm doing something that is like something that I've subconsciously been curious about or like felt like maybe I couldn't do, and I'm actually going to venture into it. Like, was there any type of art or medium that like has pushed you in a way that initially was like uncomfortable and it's been enjoyable to kind of master?
It's definitely ceramics. I think before working with ceramics, I was very impatient, and maybe it was like a little bit ego or maybe a little bit just anxious energy where it was like, if I started something, like I really just wanted to get it done as fast as possible. And usually that was at the expense of the final art piece.
Hmm.
Like if something wasn't, the way I had kind of hoped it would turn out, I was like, well, sorry, that's like how it is, because I had to finish it today for no reason.
Yeah,
But
tons of thinking.
yeah, that's not really realistic at all with ceramics. It's like maybe I could finish the sculpture part in a day, probably not, but then it's got to sit on a shelf for 3 weeks and dry out. And so it was like it kind of forced me to be more patient, which now kind of comes more natural. And that's kind of when I do, go and draw, or I don't know if I'll really ever paint again, but if I did, I think that that kind of peace of mind would carry over into other mediums.
Mhm. Yeah, I think it's so. I have so little experience with clay, other than just like assuming that I could hop on a wheel and make a plate, having never done it before, and just how much of an emotional experience that is, or how much emotion is drawn out in the
Yeah.
experience. It just doesn't like if you're angry, it just almost like laughs at you. That was my experience of like
Yeah.
you can't like you have to work with this thing. You can't like dominate it. Like
Yeah,
it'll like push
definitely.
something back. So is that
Yeah.
something that you've experienced as far as like that push and that pull of like whatever you're bringing to it and whatever the clay is bringing back at you?
I mean, it's definitely working with ceramics. I always say it's like Christmas and anti-Christmas, because if you're working big, especially like at a certain point, if you don't just like throw your hands up and walk off, like it will just all fold in on itself. So, you're really spot on in saying like it laughs at you. Or sometimes you'll be like, okay, this is perfect, like blah blah. You'll put it in the kiln and open it, and it's just completely destroyed. And so it explodes. So it's just, I don't even want to say it's humbling, but it's just kind of like it helps you like let go, where you're just like, it's not over till it's over. And
Mm-hmm.
this is like fine. Like not ever, like it's still fun, even if in the end it's just kind of like soupy clay on a wheel. I don't even actually know how to use the wheel. I've never tried.
Hmm.
I
Never
just
tried?
haven't. No, I do own a wheel. My grandma had one in her garage, and she gave it to me, and I was like, great. And I've like watched a lot of other people try at my house, and they're like, can you give me tips? And I'm like, no, I just like, honestly, it doesn't. I'm if I was good at it, like without even trying, I'm sure I'd be like, the wheel's awesome. But I just really like hand building.
Yeah.
I just feel like I have a little bit more say
Hmm.
in that way, which
Yeah, for sure. So then with hand building, After having done it, you said you're 30-ish, so what, like 10 years maybe, 10 or
Mm-hmm.
11, 12 years of working with clay. Do you have a centeredness that you know that you need to bring, and you can know if you are not feeling that a particular day or particular moment?
Yeah, I think, like, for example, the kind of portrait dog vases that I do, where people send me photos and I'll make their face on a vase. At first, I was just an absolute nervous wreck. Like maybe the first like 20 that I did, I was just so anxious. The whole time I was like, it was like a mess. At this point, I'm like, no problem. I honestly, I just let muscle memory take the wheel. Like I don't think I have a single thought while I'm making them. I mean, I've probably made 500 of them. And so I think in those specific ways, or with those like specific things, I'm like, okay, I'm very proficient at that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think like when I see like other people's ceramic work, like I can wrap my head around like how they made it. And I don't think I've had like an idea in a really long time that I'm just like totally clueless on how I would accomplish that.
Mm.
It's January, so I just finished doing like, I think I did a solid 100 of them for this holiday season. And this time, right after that, is kind of actually my favorite time to make new stuff because I feel like I have all this like weird muscle memory data in my head. And so I'll just kind of like, this is the time where I'll just kind of be like, okay, I'm going to just do whatever I want, like without a plan. And so this year I got an extruder, which is like a big Play-Doh, thing. And so I've been making a lot of funny stuff with an extruder, and it's just been very like fun.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so coming out of SAIC, you kind of find that ceramics is like a thing that you want to carry on with.
Yeah.
What are your considerations in like how this might actually work for you? Like, what were your limitations, and what did you kind of have to negotiate in your mind as like where this might take place? Am I moving back to California? Am I staying here in Chicago? Like, what are those like factors that you were considering?
So I definitely wanted to move back to California because of the cold. Was
You
like
don't
the
like it?
main no, because my freaking teeth are too big and my mouth is always open, so the whole
Cold
winter
tooth.
my teeth were too cold. I had to move.
If you don't have the right
Yeah,
teeth,
no.
that's really important.
Well, growing up in California, my teeth didn't need to become so strong.
Of course. Why would
And
they need to be?
no, they don't. Yeah, so I think I left like literally the week after I graduated. I just needed to go back to where my teeth could feel whole again. So logistically, I was like in quite a spot because obviously didn't have a studio. And then I ended up happening after a while was I got a job at this place Glaze Fire in Los Feliz, and it's basically one of those places where they have kind of all the prefab like bisque pieces, and you pick out the piece and you glaze it and then they fire in, blah blah. And the owners of Glaze Fire were super cool. They still are. And they were kind of like, okay, we fire these days, and like if you want to fire on the days in between, not a problem. And so I was like, oh, perfect. So then I ended up making enough work to kind of just get the amount of money to buy a really small kiln, which I immediately outgrew.
Hmm.
So then that's kind of how I just had slowly started building an art studio for myself, because I knew like if I wanted to do it seriously as a job and not have like a part-time job and do blah blah blah, I needed to just have something that was just my own, or
Mm-hmm.
else I don't know, I didn't really want to work in a a community environment.
What about a community environment would have been like less than ideal? Like what would that take away or add to, you know, the feeling of what you wanted a working artist to feel like?
I think I just didn't want anyone, like, I just wanted people to see like the finished piece. Like, I didn't like at college, like kind of the drawing racks are like surrounding the room. So it was like at any time, like everyone kind of already knew what I was working on. And if it was like something I was not excited about, or if it just like, wasn't turning out that good, or, you know, I just didn't feel like I had any privacy to make things that were like bad or I thought were bad, or, and then, you know, I could just kind of privately in the dead of night, like throw them in a bucket of water. But yeah, so I just think I just really wanted at that time to give myself privacy that I hadn't had yet, to kind of make things without judgment or being like, oh, you made that one piece that sucked. I'm like,
That's
well,
something that happened? Was there like feedback of process, or is that just like internally that feeling of being watched just was uncomfortable?
it was internal, and there was obviously like in classes like always like conversation while you were working, but nobody was like, oh, that looks like shit to me. I think that was just like maybe the ghost living outside of me, or the devil from hell,
From hell,
just
yeah.
making me feel weird all the time.
Yeah, I think so. I resonate with that a lot. Like when I'm ready to like put something out there, like I'm fine with it. You can like it or not like it. Like I'm fine with it. But
Yeah,
like there is some sort of like feeling of like somebody walking in while you're changing, like if it's not done
exactly.
yet. And like
Yeah.
it's an uncomfortable feeling. Like I don't know this for myself, but like do you know like how young you were when that was important to you? When you realized that like that privacy was important? Was that something you always felt, or was that like thing that formed as you started
I,
identifying as like a student of art or as an artist? Like,
I think I was totally fine with it in college. And then obviously once I had graduated and it was, okay, now I'm on to like the next phase, it was just something that I wanted to be different. I don't
like if you
know.
could choose, why not have it
Yeah,
be
why
feel
not?
better?
Yeah, and like, you know, it didn't happen right away. It wasn't like I was like, and I decide I'm alone and now I have this gorgeous studio, like blah blah
Hmm.
blah. Blah. Like it definitely was just like a extremely slow burn of like slowly hoarding all my items until I was, but then there'd be some days where like, you know, I'd have to do like a bunch of glazing, and like I would bring my work into Glaze Fire and go sit down and talk to whoever was working. Like it's not always one way. Like sometimes, you know, it's nice to have like someone else there.
Yeah.
But so then I moved. I moved to the desert.
Okay. So you live in the desert now?
Yeah, that's where I am right now. I live, well, okay, I'll explain how I ended up out here. So I was in LA and I was kind of looking for friends who had kind of like similar aspirations, because moving back home, it was like I was hanging out a lot with like my friends from high school, which is amazing, but like they all kind of have like different aspirations. So it was like, you know, I was the only person who was kind of like drawing all day and blah blah blah. I just didn't really have anyone to like talk to.
Hmm.
So I took to the internet, and then I ended up becoming friends with another artist, Lorian Stern, who's now one of my best friends. And she lives out here. So I was kind of living in LA, but it was very stagnant. And my now husband had moved from Nashville out here and to LA, and he had a job he hated. And we were just kind of like, well, you know, whatever. But I had never lived outside of a city. So I just didn't know how to like visualize it for myself. And then Lorian had asked if we wanted to come out for a bit. I think I had hung out with her one time. And she was like, I was working on some pieces for a small show at Black Book Gallery, and Will didn't really have anything to do. But she's like, why don't you guys like come out? Like, we'll hang out. You can finish your work for the show and in my studio and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, okay, yeah, why not? Like, I truly have no reason not to do this. Mm-hmm. So we ended up staying at her house, whether she liked it or not, for like 6 months, because we were just having such a, we knew we'd be there for at least a couple months, but yeah. And then it kind of
wasn't like a weekend that turned into 6 months.
Oh, no.
It was at least a small residency that turned into a longer residency. Yeah. Okay. I was like, wow, she invited you for dinner.
It was an extended offer. So then it was like kind of like, okay, like we definitely overstayed our welcome, but both of us were just like, God, we do not want to go back to the city. Mm-hmm. So we ended up renting a house just kind of like in the area. And it was so inexpensive that we were able to just focus on doing my art business, the both of us together. And then we ended up buying a house, and now I'll never leave. So it's really great. And I have so much space, and it just really, I think it's just been a really great decision. I can't imagine ever going back, especially to LA, where it's just not super helpful for me to live there.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's so interesting, like what you were craving, like personally, and that was kind of able to manifest in just like a lifestyle, but also still like maintaining some sort of community, or like maybe finding it for the first time in a way that felt really comfortable to you.
Yeah. And I feel like it was like, I almost went to like a very specific summer camp where I just like learned everything through Lorian and her husband, Dave. They just like, they were like, okay, yeah, like this is what you want to do. Like, here's exactly how you get yourself set up to do it. Like, and here's everything that's like worked for us, and really made it so easy, and it's been so great to have somebody to like ask very specific questions and like know that they know the answer, instead of like, it's so confusing to set up a business online. Like, for a while I was like, crap, like I should have just gone to business school. I would have never gotten in, but and just done it like the other way around and just figured out the art stuff like in between those classes. But I didn't do that. And it worked out fine.
I mean, that can't be underestimated, how nice it is to like, especially if in a new place, a new environment. I mean, entirely, just a desert couldn't be any more different than an urban center. Like, I mean, like you're saying, space is bigger, time it moves differently.
Absolutely.
And yet if you're connected to something that's fast paced, like an online business, I think it's interesting that those can work in tandem now. Like, you don't have to be isolated from everything just because you live in a more isolated space.
I don't have to depend on other people to like give me opportunities. I can kind of like set them up for myself online, which is great. And I felt like when I was living in LA, there were just like so many hurdles I had to jump to be able to actually like get in the studio and make anything. Like, my apartment was in mid-city, and I had a studio in a warehouse downtown that actually got condemned on Christmas Eve.
Of course, why not?
And we had to move out my entire studio on Christmas Eve while I was just like,
really
so tired. Yeah, I was like Tiny Tim. I was like, please lift my kiln into my dad's truck.
It's amazing how terrible that is.
Yeah, it sucked. It really sucked. I forgot about that until right now. But it was just like, I felt like in LA, it was like, okay, I get to pick one thing and then I will accomplish the one thing. Like if I wanted to go to the grocery store, like I feel like I only had the emotional energy to just do that.
Hmm.
Yeah, so then it was like when the literal second that I moved out here, I was like, holy crap, like I'm getting so much stuff done because like I've eliminated like all of these other like tasks around me. And even that it just worked out almost immediately that because before I moved there, I was definitely selling some stuff online. Like I didn't think I was like taking a risk, like putting all my eggs in this basket. Like I was pretty confident that I could make a nice life for myself. Now I have more time for my crafts. I'm gonna make a disco ball of my dog's head.
That's perfect.
Yeah, which
So
is fun. I never usually make things for myself, but I feel like this year I've made myself a lot of gifts.
yeah, yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I mean, this time is obviously just like such an anomaly for everybody, and it affects people differently in different places. But for you, what has started to like bubble to the surface is either, you know, solidifying something that you've always done or something that is more brand new that's like, this is really important to me in terms of like what I incorporate in my life, how I do my work or how I don't do my work. Like, what are those things that you're more sure of now that you want to hold on to and incorporate? Because you've already like taken a big step to slow down being in the desert. So like
Yeah,
slowing down further is
I'd say
interesting.
that when I'm in like at my house in my bubble, it's almost like nothing is different because I don't really even have neighbors. I have a lot of space, and to begin with, I didn't leave very often. Like maybe I'd leave when things were important. Like I'd leave for like a family birthday party and go to LA or, that kind of stuff. So I don't know. I mean, the one nice thing is that I think other people are asking a lot less of me. And so I've had more time to, like, for Halloween, I did like a special little thing. And that's something I wanted to do for like 4 years,
Mm-hmm.
but just never actually was able to give myself the time. I think that I'm prioritizing a little bit more like the things that I want to do instead of just like accepting every single thing
Mm-hmm.
and giving like a lot of my time to other people or other businesses.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I imagine, especially if what you create is also what like pays your bills, it
Mm-hmm.
can seem like a very important thing, and it is, to like keep up with that, to make sure those people are satisfied and taken care of, but then your needs or your desires could really trickle down and be harder to get to.
Yeah, I know. And it's funny. It's every time I'll take on kind of a big project for another person, I'm like, wow, I wish it was this easy for me to work for myself.
Mhm.
Uh, but I think that that's something that's has definitely shifted where I've been saying no to some stuff, which, was pretty rare for me, and just kind of letting myself do whatever I want. And I think it's been it's made me a lot happier,
Mm.
and it's been good, and I'll keep doing that.
Mhm. So we're at the end of our time here. The last question I'll ask you is what you want people to like get out of like what they, not just like the thing that they get, but like knowing the energy that you put into it and like the place from which it comes. Like, do you have hopes and desires for like people who buy your artwork, how they will?
Well, I think my favorite response that I get, and this is obviously mostly from the commission work I do, is that like I've created like a sentimental piece like for that person or for their family, because I do make a lot of portraits of like people whose pets have passed away that like meant a lot to them. And then, you know, it feels nice to hear that I kind of like created like a touching representation that then they can have that memory that has nothing to do with me. That feels good. I think that that's like definitely the most like rewarding response like that I could ask for. I can't think of anything like more touching than that.
No, yeah, I think your artwork, there's such a humor in it of like kind of the ridiculousness of like loving an animal so much, but you do love them so much. Like it's
Yeah.
just like they're so amazing and yet they're so silly. I,
And they like make your life harder, which is the funniest thing. It's like every
yeah,
time I get a new dog, I'm like, what the heck am I doing? Like, I just got a third dog. I'm like, am I ever planning on leaving my house again?
yeah.
Um, but it's like, you know, obviously, no, I'm not planning on never leaving my house again. And I needed a third dog. So yeah, no, what you're trying to explain is like so hard to articulate. I mean, I've been trying to write a freaking artist statement for 100 years and I'll never have one because it's just hard to
Yeah.
explain like the friendship and just without seeming like, you know, there's some people who don't get it and then you sound like weird. Like you're like, they're like, oh, you kiss your dog? You're like,
I do. Yeah.
yeah, I do all the time. Love it.
Yeah, I think
It's
that there's like this balance of goofiness, but not like, I don't know, like what you portray is not making fun of a dog, and yet it's like accenting like how silly they can be at times. I don't know, like it's just like,
well, they just have so much like dumb joy. Like, you
yeah,
know, I mean, the dog I've had my dog Pony, who is like I feel in a lot of ways is like an extension of myself because like I've just done the most things and I feel like we communicate like I know what she likes. It makes me sad to think I can never bring my dog into a grocery store because she would fucking love it so much. Like she would just be like amazed. Like it would blow her freaking mind. And like sometimes I'll be like at the store and like the other day I don't cat food branding like makes me laugh so hard. It's just so weird. And they have this new thing, it's called like Lil Soups. So obviously I was like, oh my God, I got a pony. And she was just like so happy. And she's like, oh my God. And you're just like, God damn, like you just loved that Lil Soups, didn't you? And so I think it's just that, like, you know, I like to do just kind of that like dumb glazed over, like, you know, people know. And there are, you know, sometimes people are like, make him serious. I'm like, that's fine. Some dogs are very serious. I've never even made a vase of my own dogs, but ponies would probably not be smiling. Yeah, she's she's very serious. Unless I'm, you know, unless there's food involved and then she kind of comes alive. But
like a little soup. Yeah.
yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
I'm a big fan. I'm so grateful that you took the time here.
Yeah,
Take
of
care.
course. Nice to talk to you all. I'll talk to you
All right.
soon. All right, bye.
Bye-bye.